Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, and it is now a course at NYU and an elective towards the journalism certificate. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, and follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, which is now one of the best books for writers in Poets and Writers magazine. And I am so happy to have Lisa Sharkey with us today. She is the Senior VP, Director of Creative Development at HarperCollins Publishers. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Estelle, and congrats on the Writing That Gets Noticed getting such a good thumbs up from Poets and Writers. That's amazing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I recommend the book to all of my prospective authors who I, do like a lot of phone calls all the time with people. I already did 3 this week and 1 on the weekend.
Thank you so much. I want to give your bio. Lisa is a book publisher for 17 years, following a long career as a TV news journalist. She recently won the Distinguished Alumni Award from the School of Arts and Sciences at Washington University, and she has published at least 75 New York Times bestsellers, at least a dozen at #1. In TV, she has a dozen Emmy nominations and 2 wins, plus Peabody and DuPont Awards as part of the team covering 9/11 at ABC News, where she was senior producer. She is also the mom of 3, a yoga teacher, and mentor military veterans at American Corporate Partners, where she's on the advisory board. And Lisa is also co-author of the book Dreaming Green, Eco-Fabulous Homes Designed to Inspire, published by Clarkson Potter. And there is a much longer bio for Lisa that I'm going to add to show notes because she just has so many esteemed credentials and accomplishments in her career that it's hard to just say it in a verbal bio. So welcome to the program. I want to talk a little bit about our history because when I was chairing the ASJ conference back in 2017, I reached out to Lisa to do a session there. You have a curious mind, and I think that is something that has really put you in good stead with everything you do because you're always looking to grow and you're always so involved in the community. I think you were recently a keynote speaker in England at, was it the book fair in the UK?
It was the London Book Fair Writers Summit. So it was the day before the book fair, but it was part of the London Book Fair. And I gave a keynote called Own Your Own Media. And it was for authors who are very busy thinking about their book, but they haven't really thought about their platform as an author. And I talk to people about this all the time. I actually just was with someone on a Zoom this morning. I oftentimes people know me and I get a friend, and they're usually like really interesting people. And they've spent so much time writing their book, but they haven't thought at all about who's their community, who, if they were to sell their book, how would they get an agent? How would they stand out above the pack? And then once they were to write the book, who would read it? How would they find people? I mean, the PR divisions of book publishing companies are incredible, but the author has to be a partner.
Yeah, it's not like back in, I mean, I started 3 decades ago in publishing when I was working at Woman's World and then later at Hachette. And the publicity team really did all the heavy lifting back then. The authors just kind of sat back, oh, send me whatever. And today it's really, they have to pull their own weight.
Yeah, so I think that the publicity teams, they're definitely like among the hardest working people in book publishing. However, they need to be partners with the author. And that's just the way it is right now. And because everyone has, I say, you have your network is right here. It's in the palm of your hand. All you need to do is sort of turn this on and do your thing, and people will come to you if you strategically figure it out and if you do it the right way.
I love that. Partners with the publisher. And I'm a big advocate for that as well. And so how do you think an author can really effectively become a partner for the publisher and really feel, because a lot of times authors feel, oh my God, publisher, agent, me. And that makes it hard to feel like you're
around the author at the top, and then everybody else below them. And the author is the number one focus, and the author has to understand that if you're brave enough to take your heart and put it on a page, whether it's literary fiction, self-help, narrative nonfiction, memoir, then that bravery that you find within yourself, you need to start crafting your own story about you, the author. Give us a window in. Share with your potential fan base or with your friends and family or your community, whether it's where you went to college or where your kids go to school or your church group or your book club, whatever it might be. They need to learn about what inspires you. What are the books that you grew up reading? What's on your bookshelf? What do you do in your spare time? How do you plot out your narrative? How do you start your book? How do you get through writer's block? There's so many things that people are fascinated by when it comes to authors and writers. And it's really not a question of being polished. It's a question of just being authentic.
That's so important. I mean, to say that, because people, I think, worry if they're going to expose themselves, right? Like,
well, that's what you got to expose yourself. Not in the kind of way that'll get you arrested, but in the kind of way that'll get you noticed, and you are trying to be discovered. With book publishing, the number one thing is discoverability. How are your readers going to discover you, fall in love with you, learn to care about you? And the only way they can do that is if they see you. And if they see you, where are they going to see you? When I worked at Good Morning America, for example, we always knew that people didn't watch Good Morning America 5 days a week or eventually 7 days a week with the weekend show. They would tune in, tune out. They might watch you on a Tuesday and then they were busy and then they watched you on Friday, or maybe they caught you on the weekend. So you can't rely on only one place to put out your content, and you can't rely on only occasionally putting out content. You need to, as I say, feed the beast.
One of the reasons that I started this podcast was for my book launch. And I wanted to have a ready vehicle where every week, there it is, my publisher made a placard, through Vistaprint, and that I have in the background. And it brings people into my world. Like, so I might not post, oh, I couldn't pick up my kid today from school because I overslept or something like that. But I'm talking and people feel they know me, right? They get a sense, a window into my mind or a window into my experience or what I want to share about what I've gone through. And so that's one way. But I see people, they do reels, I'm on TikTok too. What do you think about TikTok, Lisa?
It's the #1 driver of book sales.
Okay.
Book talk is king right now. So not everybody wants to be on TikTok. I totally understand that. Not everybody has to be on TikTok. You have to be able to sample the various social media outlets and experiment. And you have to be willing to understand that you're not going to fail in a bad way. You need trial and error. You need to see what people are interested in. But frankly, what they're mostly interested in is a window into you. They don't necessarily need anything polished. You know, they don't need lights, camera, action. They don't need makeup. They just need your face, your mind, your words, talking to them. They want to connect with you. And that's the way that people grow. I mean, I use a case study in my presentation of one of my authors, Melissa Benny Shea. She has a new cookbook out that just hit the New York Times bestseller list. It's called Come Hungry. It's fabulous. And I had a previous book with her that was also fabulous called Cakes by Melissa, because she is the owner and CEO of Cake by Melissa. The 2017, when we did the first book, I went to her office with Facebook Live. And at the time I was running a very robust Facebook Live program at HarperCollins called Book Studio 16. And I said, Melissa, we got to go live. I want you to ice a cake live. Just, you're so natural. You're so much fun to be around. Let's just shoot this as it's going. And she was like, I don't want to do that. But we did do it, and it was fine. And the book sold just fine. It was a really nice sales track. Then COVID hit, and Melissa, who lives in Hoboken with her husband, Adi, and 2 beautiful little daughters, started taking her water bottle and just sticking her camera right in front of it and chopping salads and making green goddess dressings. And she did a different recipe every single day, just no makeup, in a t-shirt. And lo and behold, her green goddess salad ended up with over 25 million views on between Instagram and TikTok, and the most viral dressing, the most viral salad or recipe even probably of the year, a couple of years ago. And her current book, Come Hungry, was an instant New York Times bestseller. It sold more in the first week than the other book sold in its lifetime, because she didn't do anything fancy. She literally just started chopping kale. I mean, squeezing some lemons, blending a few cashews, but she exposed her personality without getting fancy, and look at the difference. So look, it's not for everyone. I understand that. But if you are a budding writer and you want people to read your book, you do have to think backwards from, well, who's reading it and how am I finding them?
Right. Do you recommend that people if they have a book that's maybe coming out or it's recently out, or even it's been a while, because Backlist is big now because of TikTok, like Backlist is back, baby.
It's always, Backlist is sort of the foundation of book publishing. So front list for people watching is, you know, a book that's coming out within the past year, and backlist is basically everything else. But the backlist is the engine that drives everything, because once you've paid out all of your advances to the author, it's the backlist that keeps the book publishing industry chugging along. So, you know, HarperCollins, you know, we have To Kill a Mockingbird, let's say, on the backlist, or Good Night Moon, Where the Wild Things Are, Curious George, Amelia Bedelia, you know, 100 Years of Solitude, Profiles in Courage, you know, all of Ann Patchett's backlist, or all of Barbara Kingsolver's backlist. That stuff, it never goes away. It's the classics. It becomes the classics.
You know what I'm remembering from ASJA? You taught a Facebook Live class. That's what you taught.
That makes way more sense that I taught that. Yeah. And I still recommend Facebook Live. So easy.
Oh, you do?
Facebook groups are so easy, and Facebook Live is so easy. Post, live, talk, share, and see what happens. Why not?
Do you still do that with the HarperCollins authors? Do you still have that program?
So that program lasted for 3 or 4 years. We had a Facebook Live almost every single day for years and years and years, and it was amazing. And we ended up with 33 million views of our content, and it was really successful. But then at a certain point, it became so labor intensive for me. If I didn't have a Facebook Live the next day or that day, I would frantically like running around the building, begging people to go on. And my job is to sign up books and to publish them well. So we stopped doing it, but it doesn't mean we don't do like Instagrams and lives, but we don't have the same video staff. I had a whole staff. We had a whole studio. We did amazing things and it was really fun, but we're not doing it anymore because it's sort of morphed into other things. And there weren't bookstagrammers or book talkers back then. And now we have armies of people that can really move copies of books. So it's very fun. We even have TikTok shop where you can literally buy your book directly off of our page on TikTok.
I want to talk to you about the way that you get authors, because like you said, that's your main role, is to bring authors into the HarperCollins family, or to create authors, maybe if they haven't even written before.
When I moved from television news to book publishing, one of the things that I wanted to do, and the reason I moved from television news to book publishing, is that when the books would come into the newsroom, I would get really excited about turning the books into bestsellers via news segments that I would create for the books. That then caught the attention of Jane Friedman, who at the time was the CEO of HarperCollins. So when I got to HarperCollins, after a 5-year-long conversation with Jane trying to get to HarperCollins, she finally hired me and gave me this role and basically said, which was what I had asked to do, I want to run after ideas the way I ran after news stories. So as an example, I'll use Jamie Raskin as an example. So Congressman Jamie Raskin had been through a tremendously traumatic time in his life. His son, Tommy, had died by suicide on December 31st, 2020. And then the insurrection happened January 6th. And Jamie had buried Tommy one day before. He then got caught up in that and was afraid for his life. And then right after that, he was asked by Nancy Pelosi to be the House manager, the lead impeachment lawyer for the second impeachment of Donald Trump. I listened to him give the most outstanding opening and closing arguments, and the way he prosecuted that case was incredible. And his knowledge of constitutional law, coupled with his bravery and how he got through this trauma and did something so important for our country and for democracy. And I just thought, wow, he would be a great author. And so I wrote him a letter. And this is how I usually work. I write people letters all the time. They don't always result in what happened with Jamie Raskin. I wrote him a letter. I explained who I am, what I do, why I was so impressed with him. I outlined what I thought the book should be in 3 parts: Tommy, insurrection, impeachment trial, with his brilliant writing skills. Clearly, he's a genius. And a week later, my phone rang and it was Jamie Raskin. And he said, I have your letter, and I have many letters here, but your letter really spoke to me. And we made a deal. And then his book, Unthinkable: Trauma, Truth, and the Trials of American Democracy, hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. It sold probably 150,000 copies at this point. Then he was unsure about reading the audiobook, and I urged him that he had to. I realized that it was going to be revisiting this trauma of losing Tommy and everything again. But I said, people are familiar with your voice. No one but you really can read this. And so he did. The audiobook's been really successful as well. So in many cases, what I do is I think about who is the author as a person that's out there in the news. A high percentage of books that I've worked on that have become very successful came up that way, including 2 books with King Charles of England, Prince of Wales. And I approached him. This is when I pretty much first got to book publishing. That was when former Vice President Al Gore's book, An Inconvenient Truth, was really popular. and I'm very into eco living. And I thought, well, gosh, Prince of Wales at the time was extremely knowledgeable about green living, organic farming, crop rotation, sacred geometry, just art. And what about him writing a book about that? And I had a friend who knew someone who was the head of the Prince of Wales Foundation. I brought a proposal, ended up going to the UK, meeting with him. The book is called Harmony, A New Way of Looking at Our World. And it was a beautiful book. It's been published in multiple languages. There's also a children's book. So this is, I think, like a journalist. Okay, who's the story? What are they doing? Same thing with Michelle Miller from CBS News. Saw her story on TV during Black Lives Matter. She talked about her abandonment by her mother at birth. Her mother and father were having an affair. Her father was a very prominent Black surgeon and politician in LA. Her mother was a light-skinned Latina woman. Her father was married and she became pregnant. And when Michelle was born, she basically, handed the baby over to her dad and his mother and said, I'm out of her life. And she spent her whole life sort of longing to belong. And who is her mother and where did she come from? And eventually she meets her mother, but her mother really wanted and still wants nothing to do with her. And I saw this piece that aired on CBS, and I just thought, wow, that, first of all, I love her as a reporter. She's incredible. She's married to Mark Morial, who at the time that she met him was the mayor of New Orleans, and she was a reporter down there. Anyhow, I reached out to her within 30 minutes of seeing her and said, I think you have a book. Your story is unbelievable. And I'm sure it's much deeper than that. So, these are just 3 little examples.
This is fascinating because I think that a lot of people who are at the level that you're at in publishing come from a different perspective. They come from the booksellers or the financial, and you come from the news background, which is you have that nose for news. It's like I always called myself a pop culture vulture because I started in magazines and women's magazines. And so you sense the zeitgeist and you pay attention and you watch and you read and you listen.
I'm a journalist. I mean, I'm a journalist. I'm a trained journalist. I was, worked in TV journalism for over 20 years. Was my first, career, and it's my love. And when you are a book publisher, you can do one of 2 things. You can either sit at your desk and wait for the same proposal to come to you and everybody else all over town, including many people in your own company, or you can go after the story yourself. Yeah. I think I like the chase.
I see that. I see that. And so is there right now, and I'm not asking you to say who you're going after, but is there like a hot trend happening now? Or
there are big trends in fiction. I don't publish fiction. I love fiction and I read fiction, but it's really not my expertise. So yeah, women's basketball is a big trend. Everybody wants Caitlin, but I have an idea for a book on the history of women's basketball with somebody who's a very famous person that could hopefully write the book. So I haven't approached her yet, but I'm going to. I've just been a little bit busy. Yeah, I think there's things in the zeitgeist every single day. I mean, AI is in the zeitgeist, and
I want to talk about that. Yeah.
There's sometimes it could be somebody that's caught up in the middle of a big news story, for example, and they're very interesting. I really like athletes. I'm really interested in musicians. I just think that they are exemplary individuals for the most part, or they've excelled and people know who they are. I have a book coming out with a musician whose first book I signed up that came out in 2019. His name is Russ. He has a new book called It Was You All Along. He's a young, 31-year-old rapper, and it's self-help. This is his new book. It Was You All Along. So it's a mirrored cover. It sold 300,000 copies. I mean, I like my books. I want my books to sell, if possible, like 100,000 copies here with the compliments of His Royal Highness. Anyhow.
That's lovely.
Trying to, I've done a lot of royals books. I also did a book with Angela Kelly, the Queen's dresser, called The Other Side of the Coin. And she was the Queen's best friend. And She's just an incredible human being. And she, how the queen was always dressed for royal ascot in different colors, or she made the christening gowns. And it's like a deep story of two women from vastly different walks of life who ended up meeting and becoming best friends, and Angela helping to create a fashion icon
Yeah.
that was, Queen Elizabeth. So my life is interesting. I meet really, really interesting people all the time.
Definitely. Do you have any, oh, I would love this if this came to me, or if I saw this?
Every day, of course. That's all I do is think about, all of these books are, I would love if that came to me or this came to me. Here's another one. I have this little Tim Tebow. That was during the era of Tim Tebow, where everybody was Tebowing. I do a lot of Christian themed books that are really interesting to me. Jason Kelsey just retired from the Philadelphia Eagles. Really amazing guy, Travis's brother. I think he'd be an interesting book to do, because he's got such an outsized personality and he's got such an interesting story. I have a book coming out from a guy who infiltrated the KKK. It's called White Robes and Broken Badges. That's really a really wonderful and scary. And I actually got Jamie Raskin to write the foreword for that, because his focus has been on white nationalism and these splinter groups like the Proud Boys. And so I introduced him to Joe. I thought it would be good for them to know each other. It's all about networking as well. Like, who do I know? Who can help me think through this? I do a lot of brainstorming with other people and just trying to plug in. And a lot of times my books that I work on aren't necessarily the kinds of books that other people would think of, because I also spent a lot of time living in middle America. I've spent a lot of time in St. Louis. I lived in Texas. My father lives in Texas. I lived in Kentucky. I'm not, Ivy League, so to speak. I'm very proud of all my books, and I think they're amazing, but they're not always the same books that would be the ones that everyone else. I've published like 7 people who've been on Dancing with the Stars. I've published multiple people who have been stars of soap operas. Other people might not have touched those books, but I know how people love their soap opera stars. And
Oh, totally.
my book with Derek Huff was a New York Times bestseller. My book with Maurice Bernard, who is one of the
Love
stars
him.
of General Hospital, nothing general about it.
Sunny. Yeah.
Mental Health Award. My book with Eric Braeden, who plays Victor Newman on The Young and the Restless, called I'll Be Damned. He's a very funny guy. Fascinating life story, born in Germany during World War II. Great. So, I'm proud of getting people into bookstores that might not spend a lot of time always in bookstores. Sammy Hagar, these are really interesting people, and I love them. I love the music stories. I would say I have
have you thought of Lindsay Buckingham? I think he would be so great to write a book, because
that he was trying to sell a book a few years ago. It never crossed my particular desk. I just signed, who I won't be able to reveal, but I just signed a major country music legend. Love country music. I've done a bunch of books. I've done 3 books with Jessie James Decker, whom I adore. She first did a memoir, which was with photos, beautiful, called Just Jessie. She had 10 little recipes in there, and people went crazy for the recipes. And then we did a cookbook called Just Feed Me, which was a huge bestseller. And then we just did another cookbook called Just Eat. And she's just wonderful. And she's a country music star, but I'm married to a now retired NFL player, Eric Decker.
Amazing. I have some questions for you, Lisa, so I'm going to jump in here. So I want to know if you can share what you read, what you listen to. I mean, you have to take in so much information. Like, where do you go to get that information?
Well, in terms of what I read literary fiction. I listen to literary fiction on audio. I'm obsessed with Meg Wolitzer, who's someone I know and love. I just finished listening, even though I'd read it once before, to her novel, The Interestings, which is being made into a Broadway show with Sarah Bareilles writing the music, which is going to be great. I just finished reading The Measure literary fiction by a William Morrow author, Remarkably Bright Creatures, The Women by Kristen Hanna. Wow, that's amazing. And then in terms of what do I read, like when I'm searching for things, I'm all over social media. And I go on all of the different websites like the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, TMZ, the Drudge Report, because they curate really, really well. And they do a great job of mixing it up from like the big headlines to, the stuff that's really off the beaten path. And you never know. Like, for example, I might read a story about something with a headline. They're good at their clickbait headlines, 70% of people say they'd like to date a robot. Well, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Robot dating. I don't know. Like
I love that. That's a fascinating glimpse into how you think. When I was at magazines, we used to get USA Today because they had these really provocative headlines that made us think, oh, maybe we can use this for a column or we could interview the person.
I really listen to music. And that's my thing. When I listen to music, in addition, I listen to audiobooks. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, but I watch the news at night. I probably from around 7 o'clock till about 9:30 at night, I flip back and forth between every different channel. I go from CNN, PBS, MSNBC, News Nation, Fox News, you name it, I will listen to it because I publish conservative books also. I'm not specifically like,
You published Harris Faulkner. I know Harris.
Yes,
She
I
brought my program.
Two books with Harris Faulkner.
Two books of hers. That's right.
First book was called 9 Rules of Engagement, and it's a very interesting story about her life growing up as an Army brat, and her dad was in the Vietnam War, a really inspirational guy, and it's lessons on life from growing up that way. And then the book that was like wildly, wildly successful, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of copies sold, was called Faith Still Moves Mountains.
Yes. She came on my show to talk about it.
So I heard her say that in an early conversation. She said, Faith Still Moves Mountains. I said, that's your title, Faith Still Moves Mountains. But I worked as a journalist on that book. I found multiple stories that are in that book because of my journalistic background. And then I said, well, let's put the story of your dad from your memoir into this as a short story, because there was a miraculous thing that happened when he was flying his plane in the Vietnam War. So anyhow, I've done all of the Shannon Bream books, The Women of the Bible Speak, The Mothers and Daughters of the Bible Speak, The Love Stories of the Bible Speak. Those 3 books together have sold well over 1 million+ copies. And I have workbooks for those books with our Christian division. I have coloring books with those books with our high design division. I've published books about Jewish humor, like with Michael Krasny, who has a podcast now, but he used to be the host of KQED in San Francisco, called Let There Be Laughter, which is the history of Jewish jokes. We all need humor. I've just done a book with Jimmy Fallon, who's a former taxi driver, and it's called Cancel Culture Dictionary. I just had an idea. Let's do a book called Cancel Culture Dictionary. So many people are being canceled. Let's do what's being canceled from A to Z. I
love that.
I try to be intuitive. I try to really work on keeping this little guy open to the universe, to letting the ideas just swoop in.
I want to ask you about AI and your thoughts about it, because Jane Friedman has been leading the charge against what AI has been doing in book publishing. And I also want to know if you're like thinking of any other kind of, I don't know, that when people sign a publishing contract, it's like any books or any form now that will forever exist. Maybe there's virtual books coming at us. I don't know.
Yeah, I do, a lot of times I work with authors and come up with ideas for TV shows and things. Actually, my laptop is sitting on top of a book that became a TV show. That's funny. So I did a book with Randy Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg's sister, but she in her own right is a tremendous entrepreneur, and it was called Complicated. But at the meeting I said, hey, why don't you do a book let's also do a kid's book called Dot, about a little girl who's trying to straddle the worlds of online and nature and how much better it is to be outside. And so it's this lovely book that starts out in kind of dull colors where she's just, she's swiping and she's tapping and tagging. And then her mother tells her to go outside, and eventually she goes outside and the world opens up and it's in color. This book was our kids' division. And then I said, let's create a TV show for kids based on this book that talks about the beauty of getting outside in nature. And anyhow, she connected with Jim Henson Productions, and it became an award-winning children's show. Oftentimes, I am very involved in brainstorming ideas for turning books into TV shows or turning TV into books. I like the 360 degree of it all. In terms of AI, I use ChatGPT every day. I think it's fascinating, and I love the fact that it can help do some simple things for me. And where I think it's dangerous, of course, is if it's taking actual authors' words and monetizing it with the authors not getting anything. That's terrible. But
yeah,
put that aside. That I don't like. But what I do like about AI for budding authors is you don't have to hire your own necessarily marketing and PR person. You can talk to it and say, I mean, this just happened with a friend of mine who wrote a book, which we didn't publish, but I helped them find an agent. And then they sent me the book and they sent me what the PR and marketing was. And I had a great conversation with my ChatGPT, and I helped create a whole marketing and PR plan for this book that I didn't even work on. It wasn't even our company, but this is a very good friend of mine. And I wanted to help them figure out the best way. So I really think if you're a budding author and let's say you still want to do something great on, National Writers Day or whatever it might be, or the anniversary of your book or whatever it might be, you can talk to AI and say, let's work together to come up with a social media plan. And what do you think I can say about this? Or you can write a letter, and rather than making all the mistakes grammatically that I would always make, or spelling errors or capitalization errors, you can talk your whole letter in and just, you don't have to have them do anything except be a copy editor. There's a lot of uses for it. I think like everything in life, the same with social media, it's a double-edged sword. It can be used for good. It can be used for evil.
yeah.
I want to be glib. I know I like everything to be the good witch, not the wicked witch. So be careful. That said, it's not going anywhere. Like the train has left the station. I believe in getting on the train, the first train that comes. I want to get on the train and see what the train is. And if other people are going to take longer.
You're an early adapter.
I am totally an early adapter.
So my final question is, and I know because people are going to ask me this, and I think I know the answer, but how can people get on your radar, Lisa?
I would say at least a dozen people a week reach out to me to try to help them directly. And I think the best way to get on my radar is to come to the Kauai Writers Conference, where I'm on the faculty, teaching a whole course there on taking it to the next level. And it's in November, it's in Kauai. And I will be giving a couple of talks. I will be teaching a course, and I'm the yoga teacher. So you can wake up and take my yoga class every morning at 7:30. And, then you can take my other class. Other than that, I think, emailing me directly it's just overwhelming. I'm not an agent. I'm a book publisher. People can go on LinkedIn and link in with me, but I'm tasked, and I love this, with publishing books that are going to be blockbusters, or that have a good chance of being blockbusters. And then occasionally I will publish a book that's smaller, that's I find really interesting. It might be true crime or nonfiction, literary narrative nonfiction about nature, birding, those sorts of things. If you have a platform and you have people that are paying attention to you already, that would be the time. But when I say paying attention, I don't mean 10,000 people. I mean like a million people.
Yeah. Yes. No, I appreciate that honest answer because that's what people want to hear from you. And Lisa, is there anything I didn't ask you? You've been so generous with your time and sharing your stories, your information, your fabulous books, and how you think, which is such a window into your world that it's just, I so appreciate that. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you want to share?
Yeah, I do want to share, we talked about this award that I got at Washington University in St. Louis. And the reason I received that award, the nomination came from an English professor. I am a co-instructor in the English department at Washington University in St. Louis, where we are creating a publishing concentration for English majors. So I just wanted to say that I think it would be great if there were more English classes in the humanities and arts and sciences where students, rather than having to pay thousands of dollars to go to a publishing course at, Columbia or NYU or any of these places, if the universities could offer this so that students could understand that the books that they love to read could also be the books that they publish, the books that they edit, the covers they design. So I think it's important for anybody that wants to maybe get into book publishing to literally study book publishing a little bit more. And
it's the real world aspect and application of it, which is what's so important in the teaching world. I completely agree with you.
Yeah. And if you're the only person who's been reading the book that you're writing is your sister, your cousin, your best friends, that is not a legit analysis of your book. You definitely need to join a writers group or the Kauai Writers Conference or any writers conference and get feedback from people that you don't know.
Right.
Because that
professionals,
professionals, because my husband read it and he thought it was great. Well, he's not going to tell you that he didn't like it. I'm not saying that anyone's book is bad. I'm just saying that make sure as you're writing your book, if it's fiction or nonfiction, that you start thinking ahead to who is the reader. If you really want your book published, work backwards from your reader and understand that it's a very crowded marketplace out there. It's highly competitive, but don't take no for an answer. Keep at it because you never know. I mean, an example would be Russ, the rapper. For 10 years, he put out a song a week on SoundCloud. And then everybody called him an instant fame. No, nobody really gets instant fame. Books aren't going anywhere. I always say, books are not dinosaurs. Audiobooks are wonderful, and read widely and read fiction and nonfiction and just enjoy it. And if you're writing a book, read as many books as you can so that you understand the marketplace. Go on Amazon if you're writing in any category and look at what else is selling in the category that you're writing in and read the reviews. Everything's an open book out there these days. So you can learn so much just by actually just doing some investigating through your search.
That is so helpful. And also, I always tell my students, if you're looking for an agent, vet the agent on Publishers Marketplace. You can look up their name. You can see what they've sold, if they've sold in your genre. That's so important to keep it on that playing field that you feel that you have power as well. And it's not just in the agent's hands.
If you're writing a certain kind of book, go to your local bookstore. Nothing can replace talking to the people who are hand selling books. If you're writing a parenting book, go to the parenting section, go to the acknowledgments. They're all going to thank their agent, read the agents in 20 different books and write them all down that way. It is hard work and it is frustrating sometimes. And there are roadblocks, but make a vision board for yourself. I'm totally a believer in the power of intuition and the power of positivity and the power of not just imagining it, not just saying it out loud, writing it down and sticking with it.
I believe in that too. I have a section in my book talking about inspiration and a ritual that I do with a candle on my birthday every year. I think it's so important to have these ways. And, I was just going to say, you're definitely have that element of type A personality because you're driven, you go for the get, you're the news background, but you teach yoga and you do yoga. So I guess you found your namaste, right? You found your balance.
Namaste.
And I remember during the pandemic, you would post about, seeing the birds and seeing outside. And, it was always so inspiring. So I want to thank you for that as well.
100 days straight live from the roof cheering on the healthcare workers.
I remember that. I totally remember that. Lisa, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for being my guest.
My pleasure.
Follow me at EstelleSerasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.